In 2 days' time, Great Britain will have a new Prime Minister. Here's how it all began.
The interests of our country are best served by the immediate appointment of a strong and well-supported Prime Minister.
BBC, anyone? No? OK, Robert Peston, where are you?
And it's clear Theresa May has the overwhelming support of the Conservative Parliamentary Party.
I am honoured and humbled to have been chosen by the Conservative Party to become its leader.
With a full studio, we ask if the country can unite around Theresa May and what her premiership could look like. Hello, good evening. Even by the crazy standards of the new political age, today was breathtakingly fast. A campaign launched mid-morning saw the candidate heralded the next Prime Minister shortly after lunch. Theresa May had assumed she was making her first speech of a 9-week-long husting. In the end, she was the only one left in the Tory leadership contest after Andrea Leadsom quit the field. So how did we get to a place where the Brexiteers won the battle so resoundingly, but then lost the race, not once, but 3 times? And what does it mean when a Remain Prime Minister makes way for his long-standing Remain Home Secretary after the biggest electoral upheaval the country's seen for decades? There are plenty of questions to mull over tonight, and we devote the entire programme to asking what the next few days, weeks, months may look like. Before we head into the future, though, here's Nick Watt on the last few tumultuous hours.
I'm here today in the great city of Birmingham.
The Conservative Party thought it might catch its breath today after a frantic period since the EU referendum. Theresa May kicked off what was expected to be a 2-month campaign to win over Tory grassroots members, whilst David Cameron made a predictable visit to the opening day of the Farnborough Air Show. In a definitive illustration of how a tweet now marks a long time in politics, Theresa May found that by tea time she had become Britain's Prime Minister-elect. Showing how quickly and brutally power can transfer in Britain, David Cameron was put on notice to pack his bags by Wednesday to make way for the Home Secretary.
She has the potential to be a great Prime Minister for our country. I've seen Theresa's work on the Home Affairs Select Committee and on working through the Investigatory Powers Bill, and she has the resolve, she has the skills and she has the experience to make a great success of our country leaving Europe.
This was never about who we want to go down the pub with. This was about having the right person with the right kind of competence, experience and professionalism and seriousness to be able to step into the role of Prime Minister. A difficult time for Britain when we have some real challenges ahead of us, but also opportunities if we can have the right person as PM, and I think today we've managed that.
The caravan sprang back into life once again after everyone's plans were thrown in the air when Andrea Leadsom announced that she was abandoning her bid for the premiership. The only Brexit supporter left in the race claimed that her modest support amongst Tory MPs would make it difficult for her to govern as Prime Minister. Allies said that she was the victim of hostile briefing.
I am therefore withdrawing from the leadership election, and I wish Theresa May the very greatest success. I assure her of my full support. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I do think that there are people in the party that need to examine their own conscience about the way they behaved. I think they now need to recognise that this is not the way to treat colleagues. I hope that they will reflect on that and decide that maybe, just maybe, putting your country first rather than your own personal ambitions is not a bad thing.
Can I ask you, the interview with The Times, obviously Andrea's had a difficult few days. Do you think that played a part in her thinking?
Yes, obviously the whole saga around the Times interview was relevant because it caused a media storm. But what I would point out, though, I don't think it had that big impact on our members. That didn't stop the calls coming to me or the texts coming in, people who are really enthusiastic about organising hustings on her behalf. So she struck a real chord with members, and it is incredibly important that the new government does recognise the support for what she stood for and that it is respected.
A senior figure in Andrea Leadsom's camp told me that she walked straight into a trap laid by the Home Secretary's team. In one of the most extraordinary claims of this campaign, this person told me that the Home Secretary had deliberately talked last weekend about her pain of not having children so that journalists could then be enticed to ask Andrea Leadsom about her life as a mother. This person also told me that the Theresa May campaign were planning a second round in which the Home Secretary would talk about her battle against diabetes so that journalists could once again be encouraged to ask Andrea Leadsom about Theresa May's personal life. One senior Tory told Newsnight that this was a weird conspiracy. Other members of the Leadsom team felt it was time to move on.
Well, the decision's been made, and we've got to be common sense about this. One of the things that you see with Andrea is she's absolutely straight down the line. What's most important for our country is that we have stability. If Andrea can suck that up, I absolutely can as well. Theresa's our girl now. Brexit means Brexit.
I did support Theresa May because I felt she could step into this role straight away and could deliver the negotiation that, quite rightly, Heather has said that the people have voted for in the referendum.
So we'll have a new Prime Minister in
Today marked the end of the road for David Cameron, but at least he managed to disprove Enoch Powell's famous saying that all political careers end in tears. He walked back through the black door, humming a tune.
Right.
And we'll have more of that later. But what happens now? Well, on Tuesday, David Cameron will hold his last cabinet meeting of his 6-year prime ministership. At 12 p.m. on Wednesday, he'll then face PMQs, Prime Minister's questions, in the Commons for the last time, before he heads to Buckingham Palace to seek an audience with the Queen. Now, by Wednesday evening, Theresa May will become Britain's second female prime minister. She's insisted she won't hold an early election. Well, let's see what our political editor makes of all that, Nick. Where to start?
Well, we saw today the rapid and brutal way in which power is transferred in this country. But interestingly, Theresa May now has a 48-hour breather for her first task, which is the appointment of her cabinet. Now, the most important appointment she's going to make is to live up to that commitment she made in her leadership launch speech, where she said she would set up a new department for Brexit with a Brexit Secretary of State. The perfect candidate surely must be her campaign manager, Chris Grayling, who was obviously a leading Brexit campaigner, and that would obviously give Brexit people confidence that she's going to deliver on her pledge that Brexit will mean Brexit. But she also says she wants to be a unifier, so you'll see a balance between Remainers and Leavers in that new cabinet.
So that's the beginning. Then it all becomes a bit harder.
It does. I mean, there'll be one sort of light moment on Wednesday afternoon, I imagine, when Barack Obama phones her. It'll be an outgoing president congratulating an incoming prime minister. Nice pleasantries there. But the phone call with Angela Merkel might be a little tougher. Angela Merkel has said she could understand why David Cameron couldn't trigger the formal UK exit from the EU, but she did say that the new Prime Minister should do it. But Theresa May has said she's not going to do it this calendar year, so there may be a bit of friction there, but I think she's got two things in her favour. Point number one is the Lisbon Treaty says that the exiting country shall notify the European Council. Well, the next European Council is not until the 20th of October, so a 3-month breather there. Another big thing she's got in her favour, Theresa May is seen in Brussels as a really tough and credible negotiator.
And we're all counting those dates like tea leaves. Nick, thanks very much indeed. Well, Theresa May pledged today that Brexit meant Brexit, a bit of her speech that elicited perhaps the loudest cheers. But she's often been called a soft Remainer, someone who could perhaps have gone either way. So what will her vision of Brexit look like? And what will her vision of the country look like? Matthew Hancock has been a firm supporter of hers and has also worked closely in the past with the Chancellor, George Osborne. Thanks for coming in, Matt Hancock.
Good evening.
Many people don't feel they know Theresa May yet, even though she's been at the centre of power for so long. Which of these labels would apply to her? Would you call her a moderniser?
Well, I think that what she's aiming to do, and made very clear in that speech this morning, I thought it was a terrific speech, is that she wants to bring unity both to the party and to the country. You know, we've just had this referendum campaign. It was clearly divisive. And bringing people together, both within the party, but then, perhaps more importantly, within the country as a whole, is what she talked about quite extensively.
Is that a moderniser? I'm looking, for example, you know, if she would follow or she would encourage Gove's reforms in education or prison reform. Would you call Theresa May a moderniser?
I think that she's a unifying figure. I think that's what we've seen in the result of the ballot of MPs. So there were 199 MPs, including me, supported her. That's more than half of the parliamentary party, a big vote of confidence in her. She's also got a very strong sense of leadership. She clearly sets out what she believes and then follows it. We've seen that in the Home Office, and then we saw it again with some of the clear direction that we set today.
With the greatest respect, though, we heard that from her today, and we've heard a lot of her speech and what she's talking about there, but we're just trying to get a sense from people who know her well of what this will look like. So would you call her, for example, a Cameroon? Does she believe in gay marriage? Does she believe in the environment, in big society? Will she follow that line of his thinking?
Well, she supported equal marriage, yes, and also she was on the front page of the manifesto, the 2015 manifesto. So there's clearly a lot to build on there in delivering the rest of the manifesto, but then also an agenda and a vision that she set out today. And this, you know, making sure that the economy works for everyone was you know, the thread of that speech has actually been the thread of her leadership campaign.
Interesting, a lot of people picked up echoes of Ed Miliband there, this sort of reference to the predators or reference to capitalism not working for everyone, a sense of getting workers on board, being more accountable. Do you think that's where she's placing herself?
Well, she was very clear that what's the good thing about the last 6 years is that we've got the economy recovering, we're getting the deficit down, but what we need to do is make sure that it works for everybody and reaches the parts that it hasn't yet reached. I think this is a really important part of the agenda. Now, of course, you've got to support businesses to create the jobs that people need, but that doesn't mean that you can't reform the way the economy works so that that wealth generation is spread more broadly across the country. I think that's something that's
reaching the parts that other parts can't reach. In a sense, you must be worried about what this looks like to the rest of the country now, are you, in terms of the solidity of her mandate right now?
Well, clearly, the country's calling out for some solidity and strength of leadership. I mean, that is the strong sense I get, whether you're talking to businesses or to constituents. People are looking for leadership in Britain.
And will they say this is a leader that has been brought in by 199 MPs? That's not a 17 million person vote for a Brexit face or leader, is it?
She's very clearly going to deliver Brexit. You know, Brexit means Brexit, as she's said many times.
Of course, but you understand my point, is that essentially this radical, huge upheaval in British politics saw David Cameron resign because he was a Remain Prime Minister, and in essence they brought in the girl next door, his Home Secretary, a Remain Home Secretary. Do you think that's going to cause a problem? Will you have to go to the country for an election very quickly?
No, we don't need a general election, but what we do need to do is listen to some of the concerns, I think, of people who voted to leave and make sure that those are addressed. That's all part of unifying the country. But it needs strong leadership, and it needs that unity, and then it needs a bold vision of where the country goes now.
And some of those concerns, for example, on things like, I don't know, the amount of money that's paid to international aid, that 0.7% of GDP, would that be something that she'd say, actually, you know, we've heard a lot of voices within the party and within the country saying we need to abolish that?
Well, that's clear in the manifesto. But what I think I'd expect to see, building on what she said today and what she was talking to MPs about last week, is making sure that we concentrate not just on wealth creation, but also on making sure everybody can share a part in it.
Her mandate then is the 2015 Tory manifesto first and foremost, not, as it were, a new Brexit manifesto.
Well, we have a parliamentary democracy. We've got a new Prime Minister who has the full support of the Conservative Party, people who supported her, people who supported other people in the leadership race, all now backing Theresa May because she's clearly the best person for the job of Prime Minister right now in a period when Britain needs some unity and needs strength of leadership, and I'm sure that's what she can provide.
Matt Hancock, thanks very much. Well, Europe has breathed something of a sigh of relief tonight that Britain has at least begun to get its house in order. Theresa May is well known as a negotiator there in Brussels, seen as a commendably tough nut after her 6 years as Home Secretary. In that job, she fought hard to deport foreign criminals from the UK, but failed, of course, to bring immigration numbers down. In her first speech today, she pledged to prioritise house building, narrow the gap between employees and fat cats, and crack down on tax evasion. Her pitch was firmly centre ground, some, as we mentioned, borrowing more than a few ideas from former Labour leaders. Here's our policy editor, Chris Cook.
Today was supposed to be the first of a series of Theresa May policy speeches. We're only going to get one now, but it was pretty striking.
A proper industrial strategy wouldn't automatically stop the sale of British firms to foreign ones, but it should be capable of stepping in to defend a sector that is as important as pharmaceuticals to Britain. The FTSE, for example, is trading at about the same level as it was 18 years ago, and it's nearly 10% below its high peak. Yet in the same period, executive pay has more than trebled. So if I'm Prime Minister, we're going to change that system, and we're going to have not just consumers represented on company boards, but employees as well.
Now, some commentators were quite surprised by that speech, seeing it as un-Tory somehow. But what's really happened is that Theresa May has been Home Secretary for so long that people have forgotten what she used to be like. She was one of the original arch modernisers. She supported Michael Portillo for leader back in 2001. And in 2002, she gave a speech that's gone down in Conservative Party folklore.
Our base is too narrow, and so occasionally are our sympathies. You know what some people call us? The nasty party. I know that's unfair, you know that's unfair, but it's the people out there we need to convince.
What will Prime Minister May do then? Was that speech just positioning?
Theresa doesn't do verbiage, doesn't do speeches for the sake of making speeches. She actually, one of her virtues is that when she says something today, she means it tomorrow. And so if she's talking about corporate reform in a leadership campaign that's now ended, she will want to do that in government.
As Home Secretary, she imposed elected commissioners on the police, shook up Stop and Search, and demanded changes from the Police Federation, which acts as a union for the police.
The Federation was created by an Act of Parliament, and it can be reformed by an Act of Parliament. If you do not change of your own accord, we will impose change on you.
Some have read her fight with the police as a sign of liberalism. So, is that right?
Theresa took on the police because she saw it as an unreformed area of public services where she could build up some kind of anti-union credentials. But when it came to the security services and tackling terrorism, she's always been incredibly hardline. And I think you can see that in the way she pushed for the Snoopers Charter without even questioning what the agencies wanted.
There is a consensus among people who've worked with her that she's a Tory public service reformer, not a Liberal.
There's a lot going on in the big public services, whether that's schools or health or work and pensions. So we'll probably see continuity there. What I think we'll probably see is there'll be other areas of policy that she might want to focus on, feeling that there's a lot going on in those areas. I mean, we know that Michael Gove's been doing a lot of interesting work at justice, so that would be one area I would hope that she would do. And the other one...
Prison reform.
Prison reform, precisely.
A mark against Theresa May for many people is that she continually missed the 100,000 person a year net immigration target. But she annoyed swathes of government as she attempted to reach it.
She was a very tough negotiator, a very tough negotiator, and the business department in which I work did not win all the arguments that we would have with the Home Office, and she fought her ground tenaciously.
This is part of why some ministers say she is chilly. That, and lots of journalists dislike her absence from the usual Westminster old boys clubs. But Theresa May develops allies when she needs them. For example, she has a good rapport with Bernard Cazeneuve, the French Interior Minister. We can't say that much about our new Prime Minister, but Theresa May's instincts are radical, and her speech today suggests she's still serious about reaching beyond the Tory base.
Chris Cook there. Well, joining me now, Crispin Blunt, who worked with May in his role as Justice Minister, and May's good friend, the former Tory Treasurer, Lady Catherine Mayer. Thank you both very much for coming in. And Lady Catherine, I'm going to start with you. You've known her for 12 years, and it was interesting hearing Chris say, we don't know very much. We still don't know a woman who's been right at the heart of politics for 10 years.
Yes. But that's the person she is. I think that people have a perception of her on the outside, but people don't know her privately. And privately, she's a very kind, caring person. I've known her for 12 years. I've known her professionally, but I've also known her as a friend, and also professionally, not only as a member of the Tory party, but also as I run a charity to deal with missing and abducted children. And she's been quite amazing. And she's a person that actually really cares. She cares about children. She cares about human issues. You talk to her, she listens to you, and there is a completely different side to her.
Do you think that side is going to have to come out now? We saw her publish photos of her childhood and her wedding and her parents for the first time. Do you think she acknowledges she has to, if you like, bridge the gap?
I think maybe because it's what the media demands. But on the other hand, I really admire her for being so stoic, for being so... She's the person she is. She's different. She doesn't wear her heart on her sleeves. She doesn't come out and, you know, do television all the time. She doesn't need all this attention. She's a hard-working woman who is loyal, who is direct. And I think, of course, people need to know her more, but they need also to respect her and to respect the calm, hard-working person that she is to lead our country forward.
Chris Blunt, this is the moment the proverbial alien lands and says the Brexiteers won and they've all imploded. It cannot make sense what's gone on now, to see one after another, the Brexit leaders just vanish or self-destruct. How do you explain that?
Well, she stepped into the space by making absolutely clear decisions been made, country voted for Brexit, she's going to deliver Brexit. And given how businesslike she is and how focused she is on delivery, that gives me confidence as someone who's supported the Leave campaign that she will actually deliver
You can quite happily wave goodbye to all those on the... You're both Brexiteers.
Yes, I voted out. I've been an outer or a Eurosceptic for 20 years, but I think she's the right person. And I know Theresa, and when Theresa says she's going to do something, I shouldn't be calling her Theresa, I should call her the future Prime Minister. When she says she's going to do something, she's going to do it.
Do you have a niggling sense that Theresa May herself might have voted out in the privacy of the ballot box?
No, because she's a loyal person. And I think the Prime Minister was in, so she followed the Prime Minister.
Let me ask you, when we talk about the Cameron government, the Blair government, we always think of it as the sort of the sofa arrangement. Good friends that had known each other for years. She doesn't have that support system. Is that a...
No, what you see is what you get, which is why your suggestion that she might have voted out when her public position was remained, would actually just completely misreads the woman. She's very direct. She would see that as completely wrong to do that. And any suggestion that her supporters were going to go off and vote for Michael Gove in order to get him in the final, she had plenty of votes at her disposal. They could have run an operation to get Gove past Leadsom if they wanted to, but she was crystal clear that was not to happen.
Although she was pretty quiet. She was quite quiet, wasn't she, in terms of how much of herself she put out into the Remain campaign? I mean, you know...
Well, she would have been quite carefully controlled by the Remain campaign. She's the minister with responsibility for immigration, which was not an issue that the Remain campaign particularly want to focus on. So I think there's probably an explanation about the management of the campaign rather than her own role.
Who is her set?
I just think that she's a loyal person. I think she's very Eurosceptic. She knows the European Union. She'll be a fantastic negotiator for us. So she is a Eurosceptic.
So she only voted Remain possibly out of loyalty to her leader?
I think she remained because she's a pragmatist. And I think she looked at the facts and she decided, bearing the facts and also being a loyal person, that it was better to stay in. But I think she's very sceptical of the European Union. And this is why I would say to all Brexiters who doubt her, there is no way when she says Brexit is out, we are out. She means it.
And in my conversation with her to seek reassurance that she's actually going to deliver Brexit, I also wanted a sense that she could see the opportunities for the United Kingdom outside the European Union. And very quickly she could get into, she easily got into that territory, and you saw it today with the launch.
So that's the outward, that's the Brexit-facing side. What about domestically? Who is her set? Who is her
I want to answer
sofa,
that,
if you like?
Because I think that is wonderful, and I think that's where she's so different to all the other prime ministers. Because most of the people who come in number 10, it's normal. They come in with their set of friends. And I'm sure that it is normal. You want to be surrounded by people you can trust. But I believe that Theresa is very different to that. She will come in and she will look pragmatically at who are the right people, who are the people who can do the job, and she doesn't have a group of friends to bring in with her. Would you agree with that?
I would completely.
You can agree very quickly.
Well, I know. I do completely agree with that, and that's what does make her different. She would make a very business-like assessment of people's abilities. It's why we thought she was going to find it very difficult in the leadership race, because there wasn't an army of mates for her. She simply hadn't created that personal
and
group
we shouldn't
around.
be worried about a woman who hasn't got an army of mates.
She's her own woman, and she's a woman.
Thank you both very much indeed. So the contest that would have been determined by the vote of just, 0.25% of the population was in the end determined by a microscopic 0.00055% of the population, just Tory MPs. This to answer the unrest of 17 million voters complaining of the democratic deficit of the EU. So how credible is it to install Crown or Remainer, and what do those away from Westminster in the Brexit heartlands feel? Secunda Kamani went to Harlow.
In the end, it was a race that was never really run. The contenders for the Conservative leadership were eliminated or resigned, leaving Theresa May the winner. But how will a Prime Minister who is in favour of Remain go down in Brexit heartlands like Harlow in Essex? Did she win a lot of races?
She didn't have many races, to be honest with you.
Dave owns the Greyhound Racing Stadium here and was a firm Leave supporter. He wanted Michael Gove to be leader and believes he should have been let back into the race.
I would like to see Gove reinstated and let the Conservative Party vote.
And why do you think that's important?
Well, there's a lot more people out there that have joined the Conservative Party. I'm not saying what way they would have gone, but I think then they've got a true Prime Minister.
Up the road at the Cannonbrook Golf Club, the chair of the local Conservative Association says they've seen a big increase in members joining up since the referendum. But whilst the vast majority of the association all voted for Leave, he says they also back Theresa May.
I don't think she did a lot for the Remain camp, but...
And is that one of the reasons why you find her more acceptable?
I think it's more of the experience that she's got, and she's compassionate, and I think she will actually bring the party back together again.
But did the Tory Leave voters on the course agree?
Yeah, I don't think it should be like a walkover. You haven't done anything, and yet no one's voted for you, and you've just stepped in.
And do you think that she might not implement the full Brexit?
I don't think she will. I think she must have her own views, and you'll always try and put your own views in front of other things. So
I think the Prime Minister might set the scene, but I think there's too many cabinet ministers around her. If she does stray off the beaten track, that they'll correct her.
And you don't worry that she might try and soften the impact of Brexit, sneakily get us back into the EU?
I don't think so. There's no chance of that anyway. There's no chance in hell that we're going to get a second referendum on the European thing. That's done and dusted. It's finished.
On Wednesday, Theresa May tees off as PM. Most Brexiteers here, at least, seem willing to give her a chance, but only as long as she implements the policies they voted for.
Secunda Kamani on the Harlow golf course. Now, what of Labour today? The party expected the launch of Angela Eagle's leadership bid to rule the airwaves. But by lunchtime, even she herself was looking round the deserted room of the press launch. But the party knows it may have to ready itself eventually for a general election. So what is quietly going on there? Nick Watt is back. Talk us through the bit that no one seemed to see today, Nick.
Yes, I mean, pity poor Angela Eagle. She's finally launched her campaign today, and then it was completely overshadowed by Andrea Leadsam's decision to drop out of the Tory leadership contest. But had the world been there, they would have seen that Angela Eagle had quite a cross-section of support: Harriet Harman, Alan Johnson, then Neil Griffiths from the left of the party. And essentially Angela Eagle's message was, I am from the left, and what I represent is a change not of ideology but of personnel, from incompetence to competence. This is what she had to say.
Well, I think we know that to be leader of the Labour Party, you have to lead in Parliament too. And we've seen Jeremy not do that job. He's been hiding behind a door, not talking to his members of parliament. That's not leadership. We need a leader who can take the confidence of the parliamentary party with him. And he's not been able to do that.
And what happens now? The ballot is where things get really complicated on this one, Nick.
Yes, there's a very important meeting of the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party tomorrow, which will decide whether Jeremy Corbyn should do what Angela Eagle has had to do, which is get at least 51 signatures supporting his candidacy. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has some legal advice, which evidently says he's automatically on the ballot because it points to party rules, which talks about how challengers need to get nominations. But Ian McNicol, who's the General Secretary of the Labour Party, evidently he has legal advice which says that all the candidates should be treated equally, which means that Jeremy Corbyn would need to get 51 signatures to be there. What is interesting, there's going to be a push at that NEC meeting tomorrow to have the ballot on whether you go ahead this way, to do it in secret. It's very evenly balanced, and the thinking is that there will be members of the NEC who'd be wary of putting their heads above the parapet, but if it's in private, then maybe they'd be willing to go against Corbyn. But whatever decision they make, it's going to end up in the courts.
We're watching Labour tomorrow then. Nick, thanks very much indeed. It is only Monday, remind yourself of that, but by the middle of the week, the country will have a new Prime Minister. Cameron's conservatism will belong to history. May's Britain will be spelling out how to begin divorce from the EU and establish the country's credentials with the rest of the world. What does all that look like? With us now, Francis Maud, Tessa Jowell and perhaps one Alex Salmond, coming through the door at vast speed straight from Heathrow. We'll see if he joins us, but very nice to have you both here. Francis Maud, the thing I have been aware of today without realising it is that the whispering has gone. The Tory whispering has pretty much gone now. Do you think this was bloodletting? Is the secret that the Tories have got their loyalty, their unity back after this?
Well, we're generally quite good at that. It wasn't so good after Thatcher left, because she cast a very, very long shadow, and the circumstances of her being, as it were, defenestrated were quite brutal, and it was quite quick, and that did take time for those wounds to heal. But this hasn't been the same. I mean, this has been a different event coming about in a completely different way.
I wonder whether, Tessa, it looks to you, you know, you see the sort of mess now that Labour's in. There is something so brutal about the way the Tories do this stuff, but they get back into power. That's how it happens.
Well, members of the Labour Party, members of Parliament are absolutely hating this. I mean, I think it's impossible to describe the depths of despair that a lot of members of Parliament feel. And this
meaning the Corbyn row.
Yeah, but, you know, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn insisting on staying on, you know, not engaging or with the peace talks or the withdrawal talks, the transition talks with Tom Watson, insisting on staying when 80% of his parliamentary party have lost confidence in him. It's a terrible place to be. And I mean, it is just, whatever else it is, it's the height of selfishness. And it is absolutely the case that we now have a party of about 600,000 people. But the only purpose of a political party is to build a route to power, because the Labour Party in government can transform this country for the better, transform people's lives in ways they can't do on their own.
But you essentially see now
that a block to that.
So the Tories have a free reign in power for the foreseeable future, right?
And I hope that it will be that. No. I mean, I think you're wrapping up far too many, you know, long-term generalisations in that. The Labour Party has got to get itself back to the left of centre progressive ground, which represents the sort of consensus of politics in this country. Reach out to those communities who feel that they've been underrepresented and forgotten. And I think it's very clear what could be done quickly by a government that recognised that really matters.
I mean, is Mrs May right to rule out a general election when there will be this, you know, this Gordon Brown-like shadow hanging over her, given how small the mandate?
I think it's completely different circumstances, because you know, this was not. Everyone knew that Tony Blair was not going to do the whole of that term. there was a kind of very, I mean, the timing wasn't planned, but everyone knew there would be a succession from Tony to Gordon Brown. This is quite different. And there's an urgent set of issues to deal with, which, thank God we don't have to go through 9 weeks of a leadership election. We can get a new Prime Minister in place quickly. That's great. But actually to say, well, now we can't do anything until we've had an election, that would be really bad. I mean, just to pick up your point about, do the Tories have free rein? No, absolutely not. We went through 15 years ago a period when Tony Blair was totally in the ascendant, where he was winning elections.
But who's holding you to account now?
Well, we will be held to account in lots of different ways. It probably felt when we were a very diminished parliamentary force after the 97 and after the 2001 elections that Labour wasn't held to account. But it turns around very quickly. And actually, the interesting thing is that Theresa May was one of the first to see that actually the Conservative Party needed to change in order to be able to appeal much more widely, much more outside
Some of
our
that may
base.
be beyond her control, though.
But she saw it earlier than David Cameron did. David Cameron then embodied it and actually led the Conservative Party to be much broader, to be able to appeal much more widely, geographically and socially and ethnically, and to have much more appeal to women than we had done.
Do you think
Theresa was there before David
but you
was.
see, I just want to ask you one thought. Do you think there is a chance, though, this is Alex Salmond's point, that she could be the last Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
Well, I mean, let me just sort of unpick that question. I think I disagree with Francis. I think that a Prime Minister needs to have their own mandate. And therefore, I think the question about a general election is a question about timing. And I think that, not that, I'm advising her, but I think that there is so much uncertainty about the content of the terms of the Brexit negotiations. I think that she should have a general election once that is clearer.
It would be good for those on the, if you like, the centre of Labour, wouldn't it?
I think it absolutely would, and I think it would be good as a way of answering the questions that many people in the country have. Now they realise the scale of the uncertainty.
But I mean, there's a bit of that, how that merges into, let's have a rerun. We didn't like the result of the referendum, so can we rerun it?
No, I think
because,
you've got...
I mean, I think you have... I think it would be incredibly dangerous for democracy if what we would see here is what we've seen in other countries in the European Union, when you get a result in the referendum you don't like, and say, well, we'll go back and ask again and again until we get the answer we want.
But you've got to provide more certainty than an in-out vote provides, Francis. Already we're seeing, consequences of the vote that were not anticipated in the campaign.
Well, but that's a fault of. I mean, I was undeclared, so I took no part in this. I mean, I thought
How
both
did you
sides.
manage to be undeclared for the whole referendum?
Really easily. I mean, and I'm very happy that I did, because actually, to be honest, Emily, I thought both sides were making very overblown claims. I thought the Leave campaign were claiming benefits that had some internal inconsistencies, and I thought the Remain campaign were making claims of doom and gloom that were exaggerated.
Of David Cameron now. I wonder how you think, both of you, how you think that we will view that premiership as, one that did end in tears or didn't end in tears?
Well, I think sadly this will colour it a lot, and that's a sad way for it to end, because I think he's been a very good leader of the party and a very good leader of the country. And he has always conveyed that sense that he's capable of speaking for the country, of rising to the big occasions. There has never been a time when, just as I would say actually, as someone who always thought of Tony Blair as someone who was able to represent the country,
so
someone where you saw him representing the country.
Centre ground left, in a way. I mean, when you heard Theresa May's speech, that was tanks parked firmly on, Ed Miliband.
There is, and her strapline could have been from an Ed Miliband speech or an Ed Miliband manifesto. That makes the point that the political centre of gravity is just that. It is the centre ground. David Cameron wanted to occupy that space in the way that Tony Blair had. And that's why the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, understanding that he is trying to take the Labour Party in a direction that the people of this country will reject, is, so wrong and why he should stand down. And, I think Angela has shown great courage in being prepared to take the fight. And it's...
You probably know in your heart of hearts she's no more likely to become Prime Minister than Corbyn is.
Well, listen, we're in a time of great uncertainty.
Was that a yes, I know?
No,
or was that a you
so
know?
let's see. I mean, I think that...
We should all get out of the prediction business, actually.
No, well, exactly.
Well, I was going to ask you that. When you look at 2016 now...
No, there are not these kinds of certainties. And the nature of politics is so dynamic and changing. And what people want from their politicians is changing. And I think that, if anything has got to change, it's this... the elite showing more humility and becoming more activist.
And the most commonly heard words over the last 2.5 weeks, haven't you heard, it's all changed.
I thought it was a four-letter expletive. Thank you both very much indeed. Well, that's all we have time for tonight, but what a difference a day makes. David Cameron was heard whistling a tune under his breath that no one could quite work out. His explanation: he was worried the door wouldn't be open for him if the staff didn't hear him coming. On that note, we leave you with some of the images of the Cameron premiership you might remember, and some he might wish you'd forgotten. Good night.
Oh, mother, I can feel the soul falling over
And I want to talk about the future. He was the future once.
And as I climb into an empty...
Calm down, dear. Calm down. Calm down.
Oh, well, enough said.
Taking a risk, having a punt, having a go, that pumps me up. How are you doing? How old are we? Looking very good. So we'll have a new Prime Minister in that building behind me by Wednesday evening. Thank you very much. Right.
Hello there. Well, a week is a long time in politics, and the weather's pretty interesting at the moment as well. Sunshine and showers, but no 2 days exactly the same.